welcome to K-12 education budget. We're going to go ahead and get moving. We have a lot of things that we want to accomplish today. Quick announcement to our committee. If you will look in front of you, you have several things. One, you have the updated conferee rules. Notice on the rules, they hopefully will be on our website very, very soon, and hopefully also on the S drive. So the reason you're getting this copy here, please share it with anyone that might be or have interest. Notice there's some changes on here. Number one, it's 48 hours. Why is it 48 hours? Because as we were kind of laughing right before we started, I have no committee assistant again. So that means it's on me. I do have David Long, who is the assistant to the chair of health, and he is helping me upload testimony. The testimony is on the drive, I believe, but since I don't know the upload rules and it's a whole different technology system, I just scan them into one giant PDF. Apparently you can't do that. That would be too easy. And so he's going to have to go back later and do them individually. But having said that, we meet the Komakora rules because they are on there, just not in the way that they want them, but they are there. So if you want those files, you can get them. In addition, you should have received from me, I think it was this morning, all of the testimony that I found. Full disclosure, we didn't find it all, but we were going to take any testimony of anyone in the audience, and Bill would be one example of that. So, all right, so we're going to work together on that. So those are the updated. The other thing I would really encourage everyone, when you're submitting testimony, the key is in that subject line when you're sending the email so it doesn't get lost, is to say what bill it is, to say if you're a proponent, opponent, written only, oral, that kind of information. That is so, so helpful as we file those requests. And finally, the format, we're not picky about the format, but if you can put all of the information that is listed A, B, C, D, and E, and number 4, number 5, oh, it's not even numbered correctly, in your testimony, whether it's you or someone else you're providing, that would be great. We will update that and correct those errors. All right, committee, moving on. Are there any bill introductions? No bill introductions today. All right. To the next item of business, we are going to open a hearing on House Bill 2030. And before we formally hear from our proponents and opponents, I'll ask our revisor, Nick, to give us an overview. And committee, you will find a bill brief in front of you, and you will also find the bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So committee, House Bill 2030 deals with KSHA, and Section 1 of this bill would create a new section of law in Kansas statutes to authorize any student who is enrolled in attending any non-public elementary or secondary school to participate in any KSHA activities that are offered by the public school district in which the student resides in. To be eligible for this public school activities participation, the student would be required to be a resident of the district, to be enrolled in attending a non-public school, to comply with the requirements of KSA 726262 relating to student vaccinations, to meet the general age and eligibility requirements set forth by KSHA that are not otherwise in conflict with that new section of law, and to also pay any required activity fees that are imposed upon any other student who's participating in that activity. The Board of Education of each school district would be authorized to require a student to enroll in a course as a prerequisite or as a condition to participation if that course is otherwise required for activity participation for all other students. Section 2 of the bill would provide that KSHA shall not prohibit a student who is primarily enrolled in and attending a non-public school and who enrolls part-time in a school district from participating in an activity that is available to such student as part of that student's participation in the activity due to the enrollment and attendance at the non-public school. So again, if a student is enrolled in a non-public school, and that student wants to enroll, primarily enrolled at that non-public school, and that student enrolls part-time at a school district, KSHA shall not prohibit that student from participating in the non-public school activity. And I'd be happy to stand for questions, Madam Chair.
All right, questions? Yes, Representative Garber.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So if I'm reading the bill right, well, let me just ask you this. Can the Board of Education or the school board of the district deny a student a right to play or to be in whatever if this bill passes? The only requirement that I see is they have to be enrolled in a course. If they are enrolled, if they have to allow them to enroll in a course, and then they can participate in the extracurricular activities or whatever. Is that correct?
So a school district could not prohibit a student from participating in those activities of the school district. Section 1 says that those school districts have to allow participation in KSHA activities, subject to those requirements set forth.
Because I know in the past that students have been denied.
Yeah, so Section 1 says, I mean, if a student meets the requirements of this section, they shall be allowed to participate.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And note that they just have to be enrolled in attending a non-public elementary school. So there is no requirement for a particular amount or number of hours. Correct, Nick?
Yes, there is no, yep, they are just, if they are enrolled in attending that non-public elementary school, and they are also wanting to participate in that school district's activities, they would be allowed to participate. They shall be allowed to participate.
And just for clarity for the committee, non-public is any type of schooling. It's not defined as any one particular, so it's anything that is not public. So that could be homeschool, private school, micro school, hybrid, online, any of those, just as long as it's not a public. Any other questions? Yes, Representative Hoskin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Nick. Currently, if somebody is enrolled part-time in a public school, does that attendance count towards their FTE in the school finance formula?
Yes, it does.
Okay. However, if they are enrolled in a non-public school at all, then there is no additional funding for the school. Should they participate in an extracurricular?
So if
Except the fee that everybody is charged.
if they're not enrolled, subsection B of this section allows a school district to say you need to enroll in order to participate in this activity. Think a debate, for example. Enroll in a debate class to participate in this activity. If the student is not enrolled in that school district, they're not touching the school finance formula. The activity would just be
Right, so I know that there are some activities that require enrollment in the course in order to participate, but they can't ask a student just to enroll in a course to be counted in their FTE if it's not required for the activity, correct? Yes. So if, I'm thinking, if the activity is ecology club and they just have to be interested in ecology, then they don't have to enroll in a course, and they would not get any FTE credit in the finance formula.
And these are activities that are regulated, supervised, promoted, and developed by the Activities Association. So these are, this law would be specific to those KSHA activities. There is the part-time enrollment provision in KSA 723120 that does authorize part-time enrollment for students to participate in other and take other things at the school district, but this is specific to those KSHA activities.
Okay, but it is possible for a student to participate in some of these activities without any enrollment in the public school, in any course?
Yes, as long as they meet the criteria, as long as they're a resident of that school district, enrolled in a non-public school, and meet the other criteria, yes. And pays the activity fee if there is an activity.
If there is one, okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Representative Hill.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Nick, it just occurred to me that there's two different classifications of non-public schools. There's both accredited and non-accredited. This makes no designation between those two, is that correct?
Yes, there's no designation made between the two. So non-public school, as the chair said, accredited non-public schools, and then also non-accredited non-public schools, home schools.
So theoretically, you could have an accredited non-public school in that same district and and they could move from one team basically to another team.
They would be allowed to participate on the public schools team.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions for our revisor? Yes, Representative Boyd.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Nick, just as I'm getting in the weeds of this thing, if a student from a non-public school wanted to participate in K-12-related activities, the school district allowed this student to try out. However, this student didn't make the team. Will that school district then be in violation of this bill or this law?
This bill does not have any language dealing with that type of tryout process. So I don't know that I can answer that any more than this bill doesn't contemplate that type of situation. It's just the student shall be allowed to participate is what the standard would be.
Is that the same standard that our current public school students are under now? They shall be allowed to participate?
I don't believe we've got, I don't believe in the K-SHA laws, we've got a sectional law that specifically says anything about student participation in activities. I think that would probably fall under K-SHA bylaws.
All right, Representative Estes.
So I'll extend off of that question, then I'll ask my other question. But it's the practice that public students can, as long as they're meeting the grades and those other requirements. So it's just not something we've ever seen the need to do in the past? To have the shall be allowed for public school students?
Yeah, the state law designates an activities association to generally oversee those state activities. There's no I'm not aware of any language in state law that directs the activities association to allow certain students to participate or not. This would amend kind of that structure.
Okay. And then in terms of weighting, the things that you typically have in the school finance formula are related to kids getting instruction, and these kids would not be getting instruction and not be costing their school district money for them to be instructed in classes or anything else, correct?
Unless the student is enrolled part-time in that school district.
That money is following them, yeah.
They're not going to touch the school finance formula.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Representative Poskin.
Thank you again, Madam Chair. I do have a question that as we move forward and the open enrollment becomes the law, it says that the student has to be a resident of the school district. What if they're enrolled part-time in their non-home district, but they have to compete on a team or a K-SHA activity in their home school district?
So this would require you have to, the school that's your resident school district, that's who you'd be participating for, who you shall be eligible to be participating for.
Thank you.
All right, committee. If there are no further questions for Nick, we'll go ahead and move on to our testimony. We'll do it by sections, and we'll be beginning with the proponent testimony. What I have is that there would be 4 individuals providing proponent oral testimony. One is going to be online. John Tay, do we have Philip online? Okay, great. Philip, you are actually listed number 4 on our list. And because we are working through some kinks these first few weeks, if I do not call your name and you did submit testimony, then I will ask and you can raise your hand and we will have you submit after you give your testimony. So with that, we're going to go ahead and open with the oral testimony with John Eck. And John is a parent, so come on up, John. Committee, because we do have 2 bills today and we have lots of conferees, we are going to ask that you keep it to 5 minutes. I do have a little timer here that doesn't include questions, and the way we work it in our committee is I'll take questions at the end for each section. So whatever questions you have, make a note of it, and we'll invite John and anyone else back for those specific questions. So welcome, John.
Hello. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today on behalf of House Bill 2030. I am also speaking on behalf of my daughter Ella and on behalf of many other part-time public school students and non-public school students. Last semester, Ella was attending a public school full-time and playing volleyball. However, for many reasons, I decided at semester break to move her to a part-time status this semester. This was not a quick or reactionary decision. My wife and I spent many hours determining what is best for our child. Our goal is to raise a well-rounded, well-educated, well-behaved, and emotionally stable student-athlete. Our academic standards are higher than the public school standards. Our behavior and ethical standards are higher than the public school standards. We know we can provide more accountability and better results for Ella and do so more efficiently than the public school system can. The data regarding homeschool proficiency and stability rates supports this assertion. I'll get into those if you want at questions. I don't want to spend too much time on them right now. However, as a part-time student at a public school, we have been told that Ella is not eligible to participate in non-accredited or private school sports organizations. So she can't play with the homeschoolers and she can't play with the public schoolers. So the current law allows for part-time students, yet these students are denied a right given to homeschool students and public school students. This seems discriminatory to me. HB 2030 rightly opens up these sports leagues and puts the determination back with the tax-paying parents, where it belongs. Parents of homeschool and part-time students that live in the district and pay taxes in the district have earned that right. Next, I want to refute some of the arguments I researched last year against this similar bill, because I know they're coming and it's the best way for me to present this. So I pulled these quotes from actually from Keisha's testimony. Argument 1 says parents of these students will be justifiably concerned for the inherent unfairness since their students earn eligibility for school activities by being held accountable to specific and measurable academic standards in schools which are accredited by the KSDE. So my rebuttal to that is, first of all, I have reviewed these testimonies and almost all the opponents, in fact, all but one, were bureaucrats and school administrators, no parents. That may be different this year, but I just wanted to bring that forward, so that refutes part of that argument. Second, public school proficiency rates in math and reading have been in a free fall for quite some time. However, non-accredited private school students perform much better on college entrance exam than public school students. Students like Ella also score significantly higher on ACT and SAT tests and have higher college graduation rates. Non-accredited students also report better mental health, lower suicide rates, lower drug abuse rates, and lower incarceration rates. Therefore, I find it ridiculous to deny eligibility for academic reasons or for lack of oversight. For one, this type of language implies that I and other parents cannot be trusted to be truthful in the academic well-being of our own children. Second, I would argue that public schools should look in the mirror when discussing academic accountability, rather than concern themselves with discrediting the higher achievements of children schooled outside their institutions. Argument 2 that was presented, to grant automatic eligibility to homeschool children to play on another school's team where they have no standing or connection fundamentally changes the nature of school activity groups and teams as extensions of the sponsoring school. This one is especially disturbing to me. As a taxpayer and a lifelong resident of the district that I live in, we do have standing and connection to this school. I attended myself a long time ago, and I've been paying taxes ever since that support this district. However, after I pay those taxes, I am now informed that I have no standing or connection. I'm only asking to use a small portion of what I pay for. Additionally, Ella is an excellent student and an excellent athlete. She is involved. She does have standing and connection. She participates in Future Farmers of America, which is called FFA. And oddly enough, no one cares about oversight in this interscholastic activity. Ella is not being denied the opportunity to participate in FFA, only the athletics. Finally, this bill does not bring in students from out of district. These students live in the community and have many relational as well as financial connections to it. Therefore, this bill will not change the nature of school teams as alleged. Argument 3, and I'll be quick on this one. Parents elect homeschool by choice. Like all choices, that decision provides certain opportunities and eliminates others. This is an argument from precedent. This is a logical fallacy. It's an argument from tradition, and it's irrelevant. It's only true because of the way things were or are. It's not an argument from reason. It merely states the current state of affairs. Several testimonies from last year used this argument, and I just wanted to point that out real quick. In summary, many institutions that purport to put the needs of the students first are trying to deny rights to those same students in order to protect the institutions. These same institutions do not trust parents to make decisions for or to educate their own children, despite the results showing who is having success and who is failing, and who is doing it at a fraction of the cost. Yet I can see, and my hope is that you do as well, that HB 2030 benefits students and harms none. HB 2030 allows parents to determine what is best for their children's short and long-term education and overall wellness. HB 2030 ensures that the needs and best interests of the students will be the priority. HB 2030 ensures that tax-paying parents and their children have the ability and freedom to make decisions that are best for them. Thank you for your time.
All right, thank you, John, and we'll hold questions until the completion of the proponent section. Next, we have Hannah Self. Hannah, come on up. And a little fun fact, Hannah and I were reunited. I actually taught her in 7th or 8th grade, both, middle school, in Bueller. So that was back in the 1990s. So welcome, Hannah.
Thank you for allowing me this opportunity to address this committee on the matter of House Bill number 2030 concerning the ability of non-public school students to enroll part-time in public school and participate in non-public school activities. My name is Hannah Self, like she said, and I ask you to join me in supporting this bill. Our family began homeschooling 10 years ago and have participated with a homeschool sports league beginning when our eldest child entered middle school. At the beginning of this school year, as that same child was entering high school, she expressed interest in an elective class and corresponding extracurricular activity that were available through our school district of residence. It should be noted that said extracurricular activity is not governed by the Kansas State High School Activities Association or subject to its regulations. Knowing that enrollment in one public school class would not make her eligible to participate with the public school sports programs, I felt pretty comfortable in pursuing enrollment in this one class with our school district of residence. The school district superintendent was very welcoming and supportive of our family's choice to participate in this one elective class and activity based on what we felt was best for our child. Only when I began the yearly registration process with our homeschool sports league did I discover that our daughter would not be allowed to take any classes on campus. Per the eligibility forms for the homeschool sports league, quote, students taking one course on campus at a KSHA member public or private school are not allowed to compete in KSHA events. Participation in such events will jeopardize the ability for said homeschool league to compete against KSHA member schools. Upon further investigation with the athletic director of the homeschool league and an assistant executive director for KSHA, I was directed to the approved school application through KSHA's website, which allows this and other non-member schools to participate in KSHA sanctioned events. This application states, quote, it is understood that students from other KSHA member schools may not participate for our approved school. Failure to follow this expectation will result in immediate revocation of approved school status. So this led us to look to see whether our daughter could take an elective class virtually through our school district, still participate in the corresponding extracurricular club, again, not a KSHA sanctioned event, and continue participate in the homeschool sports league. KSHA finally consented that she could take a virtual class through our school district as long as she was not on campus for her class. The governing body of the corresponding extracurricular activity, however, does not include virtual classes in their education model as outlined in that organization's state constitution. The bottom line is our daughter could remain with our homeschool sports league, take a virtual elective, but be exempt from participating with the corresponding extracurricular activity. She could opt to take one class on campus, participate in the extracurricular activity, but be unable to participate in sports with the homeschool league or the public school district. The final option at that time was to enroll her in the one desired elective class on campus, and also fully enroll in a KSDE-approved virtual school, be allowed to participate in the electives corresponding extracurricular activity, and participate with a public school district sports team. When researching virtual school options, though, we found some would not allow her to be enrolled in the one class on campus and be enrolled with the virtual school, which would have satisfied the KSHA virtual school or virtual student eligibility policy. The result for our student was that she started the school year with a mix of in-person classes and virtual classes through our school district of residence, which allowed her to participate in the elective class, its corresponding extracurricular activity, and sports with a public school district. My hope in being here today is to make you aware of this imbalance of access to activities due to the current KSHA regulations. If a student does not meet the enrollment eligibility requirements to participate in public school sports, they should be able to participate with the non-public school activities and participate fully with respect to the competition schedule of the non-public school organization. Families should be able to choose what they feel is best for their student in terms of classes and activities as reflected by where they choose for the majority of their students' enrollment to occur, be that public or non-public school. Thank you for your consideration, and I hope you will support this bill.
Thank you, Hannah. And you had 16 seconds to spare. And as your former science teacher, I'm very proud of you. Good job. All right, committee, we're going to go on to our next conferee is Shannon Pauls with Yes Every Kid. Welcome, Shannon.
Chairwoman Williams and members of the committee, first of all, thank you for holding this hearing today and the opportunity to provide testimony. My name is Shannon Pauls, and I represent Yes Every Kid. We are a nonprofit dedicated to creating an environment where every student has the access to an individualized learning experience. We support House Bill 2030, which provides families with the flexibility to tailor their child's education to best fit their unique needs without having to sacrifice traditional public school sports or extracurricular activities. I think we can all agree that no one understands the unique needs of a child like a parent does, and over the past few years, there's been a growing number of families seeking an alternative to the traditional approach to education. Parents make these decisions for multiple reasons, but ultimately that decision is driven by the desire to do whatever is in the best interest of their child. This legislation provides fair access and allows students to grow and flourish in an environment that helps them develop their skills and gain experience. Before closing, I would like to highlight something from the mission statement of the Kansas State High School Activities Association, which states, "Our association is strengthened by equity and diversity, and participation in interscholastic programs promotes student academic achievement. By allowing students who are homeschooled or who may be enrolled on a part-time basis to participate in public school activities, KSHA is following its mission of promoting diversity and equity while also providing students with the developmental advantages that come from participating in extracurricular activities." So in closing, House Bill 2030 will expand opportunities for students while empowering families to make decisions that are best for their child's individual needs, values, and priorities. So for those reasons, we respectfully ask for your support of this legislation. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Shannon. And now we're going to move online, and we have Philip Hope, and he's going to correct me in pronunciation. He is joining us, let's see, via WebEx.
All right, hopefully you guys can all hear me. This is my first time testifying in, well, in any way, but this way in particular. My name is, Philip Hoppy, and I'm father. We actually have, me and my wife have 7 children who currently are homeschooled by my wife primarily. We live in Colby, Kansas, out on the western end of Kansas, and so I hope to speak to some degree as one who lives in western Kansas, because I think there are some things that are unique to our situation that will be affected by the passage of this bill if it were to be passed. The other thing is I just moved back to this area. I'm a pastor, and I just took a call back here to Kansas, and I had been in Minnesota. The laws in Minnesota regarding these type of activities are very similar to what House Bill 2030 would allow. And so, I've experienced a state where these kind of things go on quite easily, and I can say that we never had any trouble from the school districts, or the school districts never, said they were having great trouble including homeschool and other children into their sports activities. So I know it can be done, and it can be done with a relative amount of ease. I am a Kansas boy at heart, though, and so when we got back here, I was happy to hear of this bill being moved forward here. We lived in Ellsworth, Kansas for a while as well, and knew that at that time our children would not be allowed to participate in these activities. Particularly out here in Western Kansas, it is sometimes hard to find activities for children, and particularly older children, meaning, once they get, especially past elementary into that junior high stage, because most of our smaller communities are not going to offer, rec league type activities for that age group, because the majority of kids are going to be in the schools, and there probably would not be enough kids to also have a rec league, which might occur in more, in larger areas perhaps. So we do have that particular trouble out here. On the flip side of that, I know we do have some school districts which have actually wanted to allow non-public school students to participate, but could not because of the the high school sports group and their rules. I know the school district in Weston actually stepped down from the KSSHAA, if I got all those letters right, so that they could allow homeschool. So there's also this thing where there are actually school districts which are being forced to sort of choose between either participating in those activities that the state offers or allowing homeschool students. So I believe this would actually give some of our smaller school districts opportunity to have enough players for their teams, opportunities perhaps to good athletes that they would like to play on their teams, and other benefits as well. The other thing that I wanted to point out that I think has not been said is that I think this is a good bill just for the good of our society and our communities, because I don't think we want those that are not participating in public education and those that are to become too far removed from each other. And allowing this allows us to have, though it might be a limited interaction with one another in the public square, it is a very real interaction, both for the kids who are going to be our future in this state, but also for the parents of the kids right now to get to know each other, and perhaps then to better understand why certain parents are making one choice and another parent is making another choice for their child, and perhaps not have such, just disdain for each other or questioning of one another, actually getting to know. So I think it would actually help our communities to allow non-public school students to have some participation in the activities, and particularly the sports activities that are available. We actually in Colby do have the opportunity to play with a homeschool association, but that requires, I think, even more travel than the public schools would out here. And there's also a local Christian school we're able to play with. So for us, we have a little more opportunity, but those activities are always varied year to year based on who's coaching and how many students there are. And they can widely vary in sort of their effectiveness and even their ability to coach in a way that will just help our kids in life. Finally, I do think it's just equitable to allow those of us that are living in these districts to be able to participate in these activities, and, obviously paying the fees. If there's any concern about, that we end up costing the school districts something in order to play, I would hope that that could be addressed by the legislature as well, to somehow include that in their financial, formula, so that, that would not impact the schools at all. Because if we do incur a cost, then it seems like those of us that are paying taxes, some of our taxes should be funneled to the schools for that purpose. Again, I'd ask you also to be a proponent of this bill, as I am, and to urge its passage when it hopefully makes it out of this committee and onto the floor. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Philip. It's always a good day when our WebEx works for us, so thank you, Jonte. All right, so we have questions. I will open up to the committee. We have 4 individuals that provided proponent. I should ask, was there anyone I missed that submitted testimony? No one, and we do have written testimony that was submitted, and that's from James Franco, president of Kansas Policy Institute, Kristen Cavender, and by the way, some actually went ahead and just emailed you all, and in that case, if it's not specifically for testimony, I don't normally include it, but because of the confusion, I have included some, all right? Well, some is just because the ones that actually write it all out, and it's all more formal. I believe Dina Sorensen sent some testimony out to the committee. Brittany Jones provided testimony from the Kansas Family Voice. Veronica Miller, Aaron Sullivan, and John Luth. So, but I just making sure I didn't miss anybody that had submitted oral. All right, great. So are there any questions from our committee from any of our proponents? You guys did such a fantastic job that there are no questions. So thank you very much for providing testimony today. And we'll go ahead and close this portion of our hearing and move to the neutral, which we do not have any neutral today, unless I have misplaced any neutral testimony. Any neutral? All right. Next, we'll be moving to the oral opposition. And we're going to start with the individual that I didn't get the testimony, and it's our fault. I'm sure it's our fault. So, Bill, come on up. Bill Faflick. He is Executive Director of KSHA. And so, Bill, if you wouldn't mind, when you're finished today, when you get back to your office tomorrow today, go ahead and resubmit it back to me. And you can also copy my adopted assistant, which is Brenda's, and it's David Long. And Leah can help you, or you can let us know. We'll help you get it to the right place. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the opportunity to come before you and to provide testimony on behalf of the Kansas State High School Activities Association and the 759 member schools that are part of our association. As it is presented, the Kansas State High School Activities Association is opposed to House Bill 2030. Our membership has adopted eligibility standards in an effort to ensure students who represent their respective schools meet those minimums as approved by our governing boards in 6 areas. Those areas are fairly clear. They're relative to scholarship and academics, enrollment, age, semesters of attendance, citizenship, and transfer. Those standards are put in place by a comprehensive group of educators, much like myself. I'm a lifetime learner, a teacher, coach, administrator out of the Wichita Public Schools for 32 years. Probably the most important hat I wore, though, is that of dad, with 4 kids who have graduated from Wichita High School East. This group of educators and stakeholders who make up our board, 77 in number, truly do have the best interests of students at heart. They've created, adopted, amended, and supported eligibility standards which support student growth. The goal of eligibility standards is really twofold. First is to provide accountability for students at the base level, which promotes student achievement while promoting positive behaviors, helping students academically and via the development of social emotional skills and positive school and community culture. The second is to help support a level playing field where students competing with on the same team and against opposing teams are held to the same minimum standards. The association understands and recognizes and supports schools who have elevated those standards and have standards above and beyond the baseline adopted by the membership. Ultimately, this bill comes down to those very standards, and the standard that the KSHSA has used for years, which we believe is one that separates us from club activities, community activities, rec leagues, and that is the opportunity to perform at an academic level so that as you represent your school, you have met that standard of meeting academic standards. We believe and have been told many times that activity participation is one of the very best, if not the best, at-risk programs that is offered in our schools, keeping kids connected to teachers, to learners, to their school classmates as they work together towards common goals. The standards in place for scholarship eligibility require a student pass 5 credit-bearing classes. Those credits come from courses completed over the course of a semester or school year in schools accredited by the KSDE. We believe this entity, charged with teaching and learning in the state of Kansas, provides oversight of that accreditation process, needs to evaluate, which is in place to evaluate learning standards and accomplishments of those particular students. This provides the motivation for kids that might be challenged academically to continue to attend school, to continue to learn, because they seek the opportunity to represent their school. They seek to play a sport they love, an activity they love, and it may be debate. It may be forensics. It may be performance-based activities or academic-based activities, and it may be athletic activities as well. Certainly, in all candor, you would not want me setting the standards for any medical procedure or any building project, because I don't have training in that regard. That's why we rely on the KSDE for accreditation. The concern relative to using those non-accredited courses is that in many cases there's no oversight. There's no external entity that is charged with reviewing what actually takes place. There is significant concern, and I spell a little bit of this out in the written testimony, of promoting a potential for kids leaving a school because they're not eligible to go into a non-traditional setting or a non-school setting where they would automatically gain eligibility, effectively dropping out of school so that they can participate in activities. We don't want that for any student. We want kids to be completers. We want kids to be prepared as a result of their opportunity in school to be taught and to be coached, to be sponsored by coaches and sponsors that want those same things. We do have a couple of policies that do provide opportunities for students that are not fully enrolled. We have changed that policy since the beginning of this year. You heard testimony earlier today or earlier this afternoon on a case that we had never encountered before. We had never had a part-time student in one of our programs, to our knowledge, participate in a homeschool setting. We simply have changed language as we move forward going into next year to allow eligibility at those non-accredited schools, those virtual schools, through this process if they are not eligible in a KSHSAA member school, much like the language requests in the bill. So we don't feel like that's a challenge as we move forward. That second is certainly a virtual policy that allows for accredited virtual programs to be used as the basis for students who take one class in their school, being connected, being part of the enrolled process, and therefore earning that connection with that school community. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak to House Bill 2030, and thank you for your leadership. These are difficult issues because there's passion on both sides, but I know that you will evaluate this and make appropriate steps as you move forward. We hope that you will consider that fundamental difference of accreditation and the basis by which it provides substance of learning for the students in our programs, and the link it provides to keeping kids accountable to learn and grow through activity participation. Thank you, and I'll stand for questions at the appropriate time.
All right, thank you, Bill. Next, we have Dina Horst in Anma. Dina, welcome. She is representing the Kansas State Board of Education. And we'll get going.
I am Dina Horst. So it will be me instead of Ann. Anyway, Chairwoman Williams and Vice Chairwoman Landwehr and Ranking Minority Member Wynn and committee members. And I left it off the written part, so sorry about that. I'm adding it now. I want to thank you for the opportunity to appear before you in regards to House Bill 2030. We do see some issues with this bill because we believe that it's unintended, but we see the potential for misuse by students who have been failing their schools, and there's no restriction that they can withdraw and become a part of a homeschool or whatever they might choose. And then they would be able to participate. We also have concerns that you have a school community. The community is a bigger place, but the school is a smaller community. And when you're a part of that community, you see each other in the hallway. You see each other in several classes, not just one. And in fact, you might not even see that student that you're referring to in the bill. So that student may only be practicing with the students who have been selected to be a part of that team. So it does relate a little more to a club sport, that you show up to practice. You aren't really a part of the school community. So I think it's important for you to consider that component. Being a resident in a community, having parents or grandparents that are taxpayers isn't the same as being a part of the student body in which you participate all day with the others who participate in your community, in your activity. We also have concerns that school districts will have no way of figuring out whether a student is truly on the same level academically with their peers. So because there's no proof of that being required. And we've heard from parents who are obviously prepared to teach kids and lead them into greatness. But I can tell you, as being a teacher myself, who has had the opportunity to have homeschool students come to them, not all parents have the same capability or the interest. So I think it's important that if we're going to do this, that school districts have a way to evaluate whether that child is at the level and truly hasn't just been given a grade that will allow them. There's no mention of transportation. And there's an issue with the statutory responsibility of KSHA to determine, regulate, and supervise. And one thing that I want to mention, if a non-public school provides activities for their students, there appears to be no restrictions of students from that non-public school deciding that they want to participate in the activity of the public school rather than at the school at which they spend the larger part of their learning experience. And finally, public schools are always available to parents. Choosing to instead attend a non-public school is a personal decision. And along with personal decisions always come some benefits and the loss of other benefits. Thank you again for allowing us to come before you with our concerns. And I will stand for questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you, Dina. Next, we have Leah Fleiter from KASB, and I believe you're the last oral testimony. Is that correct? All right, welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I'm Leah Fleiter with KASB. As the chair said, I have a brief testimony before you today, and so I won't read it as instructed. But, I wanted to note our traditional support for local control and also our respect for the statutory authority of KSHA and locally elected boards regarding student athletics and activities. Our members have told us repeatedly that they believe in those statutory authorities of both of those entities, and they would respectfully ask the legislature to kind of stay in its lane. And I think I'll just leave it at that and stand for questions at the appropriate time.
45 seconds. All right. We also have committee some written testimony, and it's from Bryce Wakes, superintendent. And so be sure and check that out. It is in the S drive, and it probably is on our webpage as well. So with that, committee, I'd like to go ahead and open it up for questions for individuals that just provided opponent testimony. This is a quiet group. Representative Estes.
Thank you. I'd like to direct my first question to Mr. I'm so sorry, I'm not going to pronounce it right. Flaflick? I'm trying not to sound like Affleck. I'm sorry. One of your concerns really seemed to be a sincere concern about bad actors. So I wondered if you guys had looked at other states, because there are other states who do allow this. Did you look at some of the other states? Did you notice any patterns? Did you find out what they're doing well, what they're doing poorly?
Yes, ma'am. Certainly, this is a discussion that has been part of our section meeting of the National Federation of High Schools, as well as the larger body, the 51 state associations. And those that have done it well seem to have a greater oversight of those home schools. There's different levels of oversight that can be implemented according to either statute or State Department expectations. In this case, in Kansas, home schools register, and then there's not much beyond that. Other states have a higher level of input and accountability all the way up through state assessments in some places. And, that has certainly not been the case in Kansas. But that would be the biggest difference, is that oversight, that accountability for those non-accredited schools.
It occurred to me while you were testifying, we could be so careful about the bad actors that we have an unintended consequence of punishing students who are going. So it seems like, to me, your position could be perceived as, well, we're going to keep everybody from doing this because one or two people might break the rules. And that was a little bit uncomfortable for me, and that's kind of more of an opinion. But since I have that opinion and you're here on the record, I kind of wanted you to get a chance to respond.
Certainly, and I appreciate that. No one at the High School Activities Association, no educator that I ever have known would want to punish students for doing things the right way. But we also know that the activity program is one in which there is that accountability, and it's hard for us when there's not a metric in place to measure the success and there's not a standard in place to measure that. And I'm a very trusting person. You know, I'm a high truth, high grace type of person where I believe that when somebody tells me something, unfortunately, I've learned that that's not always the case. And we don't want to throw the really good parents out like we heard from today, just because there are some of those others, but it's hard for us to discern and have that measuring. We are not equipped to make that evaluation of what's a good school, what's a poor school, what's a good homeschool. I tell, and I shared this with the House Committee or the Senate Committee the other day, I have a 355-way tie for my favorite high school in the state of Kansas. And they're all equally the same, because as soon as we say your school is better than another school, we open up the opportunity to move students back and forth across those boundaries.
Okay, and you brought up the measurements and the accountability, and I just took a look at the newest state assessment scores. And they've been, over the years, very concerning for me. We have 4 levels. A level 1 is the most basic, and we're hoping for level 4s. The limited and the basic level in math in Kansas, all grade levels, is 34.19 and 36.44%. So that totals 7.63 of our students are limited and basic in their use of math, and our prediction of how they're going to do when they're career and college ready. English language arts, those lowest 2 levels are 33.94 and 33.95 for a total of 67.89. So we have such high staggering numbers of not the outcomes that we want. We only have 20.69 kids at a level 3 and only a 8.66 at a level 4 in math. And for time's sake, I won't go through the English language arts, but I don't see an apple and an apple here, because I don't think we're getting the best outcome that we want in education right now. And I just wanted to understand how aware of our standardized test scores is Keisha, and is that something that you guys look at?
As a teacher, as a former school district administrator responsible for the secondary schools in the Wichita district before I joined the association, it's absolutely something that I continue to monitor and know we can do better, and know our folks are working hard to do better. We need more programs that provide incentives for kids to perform at that high level. We need opportunities for those. One of the challenges for kids that are in our schools now, they might well be displaced on those teams, or you had mentioned before, well, are they guaranteed the opportunity to participate? In some of our activities where they're competitive in nature, there's a set roster. You can only have 12 kids on a basketball roster, and otherwise those kids aren't going to be playing. So you eliminate kids from even participating, and those opportunities would be potentially forfeited by students that are not even part of that school during the school day under this proposal. So yeah, I believe that those incentives that we fight so hard for, to provide connections for kids, to provide a reason for them to get out of bed in the morning. You know, I'm a math teacher, and my kids were much more excited to go to a cross-country meet that I was coaching in than they were to come take a math quiz. And as a calculus teacher and as a general math teacher, I knew that I wanted to find ways to connect to students, and we need to empower our teachers. We have great teachers in Kansas. We need to empower them to be able to work with those kids and provide the resources for them so that those test scores will go up. Activity participation is one of the ways to make that happen in my heart. There's other ways as well, but I know this is a short meeting, so that's my short answer.
I guess I feel like those kids who are asking to come to participate are just as important as the kids in that building during the day, and I feel like they're getting treated like a bad actor, and I'll stop there. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman.
Representative Landwehr.
Thank you, and if you'll stay up there, please. So does Keisha then, or KSA, I guess it's pronounced, set academic standards for participation in all school buildings?
Yes, ma'am. That standard of passing 5 classes is the minimum standard for all of the 759 members, both middle school and high school.
So passing a class with a D?
Yes, ma'am. And now many schools have a higher standard than that. Many schools have standards that you don't participate at all unless you're A's, B's, and C's. And if you have multiple C's, or if you have multiple C's or D's, you don't participate. So schools can go above and beyond that, but that has been the minimum standard. Yes, ma'am.
So you could have 5 elementary schools in a district, and one of them allows A, B's, and C's. One of them allows you only if you got A's and B's, and that's equitable?
I would say no. We don't deal with the elementary schools. We're middle school, junior high, and high school. But
high schools,
so
I don't care.
that eligibility is there. And what we have found is most districts have a common standard across that district. Coming out of 259 with 18 middle schools under my jurisdiction, we had the similar standards so that we were able to, we knew our population was transient and there were going to be a high level of mobility so that when students went from school A to school B or school A to B to C within a school year, there would be some common ground, some common starting point. So we had that standard in place at those schools.
Okay, but if you, let's take Wichita, for example, and I don't have it off the top of my head, the number of school districts that actually come into the Wichita area. I know that Goddard does, Mays does, Valley Center does. Augusta? Into the Wichita boundaries, the city boundaries? No, okay. But, so they could all have different, Wichita says you have to have A's and B's, and Valley Center says, yeah, D's are fine because you guys say that they are, and another district says that you can't have anything below a C. So where's the equity in all of that? Because those kids are playing each other.
That is correct. And we don't regulate the maximum, we just regulate the base.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
All right, thank you. Any other questions from our committee? Bill, a few from the chair. All right, thank you for being here. All right, so you said that you made some changes, perhaps because you had an instance where because we passed part-time enrollment committee last year, and that part-time enrollment created new opportunities for students across Kansas. That is an example of realizing that there are diverse students, diverse needs, and that was a great step forward to allow for that diversity across Kansas. So having said that, what were the changes that you made?
The change that we made was specifically in reference to the student that was partially enrolled in a member school. Historically, we have this partnership with member schools compete for against each other all year long and compete in the championship season at the end of the year. They can play against an approved school, which is a school that follows some of the rules of the Kansas State High School Activities Association, particularly in regards to age and number of semesters, because we don't want an imbalance. We don't want a superpower team where there's a potential or an increased risk, a liability exposure. So we maintain an interview process where they will apply to be an approved school so they can play against our schools in the regular season, and we call those approved schools. This is only at the high school level. At the middle school level, they can play any school they want. So that approved school requirement was if you were a student in one of our schools, you would not be, the approved school would not be able to use you in competition. We didn't believe, after thinking about that based upon the conversations that we had, that was the appropriate thing. If they're eligible at our place, they wouldn't be eligible at another school. If they're eligible for the approved school, no problem from the association's perspective.
So from here going forward, a student such as the one that you had inquire earlier in the fall that was taking one class at a public school would be allowed to continue to participate in their approved homeschool activities.
The Kansas State High School Activities Association would have no rule prohibiting that. It would be up to that approved school whether they want to have that student. We would not hold it against that approved school and say, well, you can't be an approved school if you do this. So
I think there's some ambiguity in the forms that I've looked at and the forms that were shared in the testimony earlier today that clearly would prohibit it. So just a friendly offer is that KSHA should probably look at their policy and rather than, just be sure that it's clear for everyone that is participating. And then my other question, Bill, is what is the requirement to participate in a public school? How many hours?
Must be enrolled in attending 5 classes of unit weight.
Okay, so more than part-time.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and then it was mentioned that other states do have allowances, and the list of those states are the states that allow full inclusion. That means that you can be homeschooled and participate in your school are Alabama, Alaska, Arizona, Arkansas, Colorado, Florida, Iowa, Kentucky, Louisiana, Maine, Minnesota, as we just heard, Nevada, New Hampshire, New Mexico, Oregon, Pennsylvania, South Carolina, Tennessee, Utah, Vermont, Washington, Wyoming, and then of those that I didn't read, there's 6 that allow part-time, so less than 5, and there's 4 that allow local school districts to make that decision for them. Have you had any instances where you've had students move into or that have approached Keisha from out of state in one of these states and inquired to you, why doesn't Kansas allow it? It was great where we were. Have you ever ran into that?
Yes, ma'am.
And your response?
Our response is we want to see students participate, and we offer the virtual eligibility program. The first thing we always ask about homeschool students is, what is your definition of homeschool? Are you enrolled in a traditional homeschool where mom and dad are providing the course of instruction and deciding the content, or are you taking virtual classes at home through a KSDE accredited program? That allows us to direct you to our virtual eligibility program and participate at the home school, or potentially to an approved school that would be in that community. We're pretty good recruiters for the home school programs or the approved school programs in the respective communities. We have 33 that are currently participating against our member schools.
Okay, well, you can only imagine. I'm a bit dismayed and surprised that we wouldn't let all kids participate in Kansas because all kids have parents that are renting or paying taxes. And I just pulled out my property tax bill for 1 year for one house in Butler County for my school district alone. It was over $2,000. And that's a lot, and for just that school district. So it doesn't matter if my kids went to public, private, or I didn't have kids. I'd still be paying that. And so I'm disappointed in Kansas that we are a no-entry state. We are one of the only 17 states that prohibit. And for us to talk about diversity and inclusion and the needs of variety of children, this to me just strikes an opposite of that, but that's just me giving an opinion. Any other questions? All right, thank you so much, Bill, for providing testimony today. Thank you for all of our conferees for being here. With that, committee, I will close the hearing on House Bill 2030. And we will now move on to our next one, House Bill 2060. And Nick will go ahead and give us an overview.
That's why I asked you if you wanted to be on the list.
Oh, you didn't say.
Okay.
1 minute here, Nick, before you go. There's a point of privilege, and I think it's a great idea.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to introduce one of our new State Board of Education members. Danny Zeck, would you just stand up so people would know who you are? He comes to you from my district, which includes, I'm in Leavenworth County, but at the northern tier. Just be careful because he'll try to sell you a used car.
Danny, I have to admit, I saw you over there. I thought, you look really familiar, but you dressed up today. So great. Great to have you in committee today. I'm sure Dina was glad to have you as well. Any other state board members? Okay, awesome. Oh, you're always welcome here. Nick, thank you. Oh, she was? Okay.
But this is a new school board member, not an old one.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Committee, this bill is pretty straightforward. This House Bill 2060 would establish the Special Education and Related Services Funding Task Force. And this, the task force's duties would consist of studying and making recommendations for changes in the existing special education funding formula, conducting hearings and receiving and considering suggestions from teachers, parents, the Department of Education, the State Board of Education, other governmental officers and agencies, and the general public. concerning the funding system for special education, and then making and submitting reports of its findings to the legislature. Under House Bill 2060, the task force would have 10 members. The 10 members would consist of 2 members appointed by the Speaker of the House, 2 members appointed by the President of the Senate, 1 member appointed by each minority leader of the House and Senate, 1 member appointed by the State Board of Education, 2 members appointed by the State Department of Education who are professionals in the field of special education and related services, and finally 1 member who shall be a parent of a student who receives special education and related services. And in 2023, this member would be appointed by the Speaker of the House, and 2024 by the President of the Senate, and then it would alternate accordingly. The appointment authority would alternate like that. Members would be required to be appointed on or before July 1, 2023, and the Speaker of the House would designate the member who would call the first meeting of the task force, and then upon that first meeting, the members of the task force would select their chairperson and vice chairperson. This bill would authorize the members that are on the task force to be paid amounts for expenses, mileage, and subsistence allowances. If it's approved by the LCC, staff from my office, the Reviser of Statutes office, the Kansas Legislative Research Department, and Legislative Administrative Services would be required to assist the task force as needed. And this bill would take effect upon publication in the Kansas Register to get it started. And I'd be happy to answer any questions, Madam Chair.
Questions from committee? Yes, Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The question I had, where it outlines who they're appointed by, for example, 2 by the Speaker of the House, does that, they must be representatives? They don't have power, or does anybody in this have power to appoint someone not in those particular divisions?
There is not a requirement that those be members of the legislature. So the members appointed by the Speaker could be any person.
Thank you.
Representative Lambert. Oh, great. Any other questions? All right, thank you, Nick. All right, we'll go ahead and open the proponent. There are no proponents that are providing testimony today. We do have neutral, and so I'll welcome Scott Rothschild from the KASB to provide neutral testimony.
Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members. My name is Scott Rothschild. I'm the communications editor with the Kansas Association of School Boards. Thank you for the opportunity to present neutral testimony on House Bill 2060, which would establish a special education task force. Kansas educators work hard every day to try to provide the best education possible to students with special needs. The formation of a task force to gather information about special education that could hopefully produce even better services is a good idea that we agree with. We would support the bill, but for a couple of concerns. We believe the task force would produce better recommendations if it had more individuals with firsthand knowledge of special education. I believe 12 years ago, there was a special education task force that included membership from education groups such as KASB, KNEA, and USA Kansas, which represent school boards, teachers, and administrators. These are the people who would be responsible for implementing or living with any changes from this task force. In addition, it seems like it would make good sense to have more parents of students who currently receive special education services on the task force. Secondly, we steadfastly believe creation of such a task force cannot delay any action on increasing special education funding now. Many of our districts are diverting many dollars from general education to special education because both the state and the federal government have not fulfilled their commitments to special ed. This hurts all of our students. KASB, along with other major organizations, supports the governor's 5-year phase-in of special education funds to reach the statutory level of 92%. In conclusion, we believe the increased special education funding from the state pushing the feds to do likewise. We appreciate the HCR that is being promoted. And a well-represented task force can all be done at the same time. Nearly 1 in 5 Kansas students receive special education services, and they deserve our best efforts. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Scott. We also have some written testimony that is neutral from Dina Horst and Ann Ma from our state school board, and that was written only, is that correct? Okay. And we also have, I wasn't sure reading the testimony if it was neutral or opposition, but it was from Joan Gilson, and I believe that was only written. So I'm looking out the audience. Looks to be correct. Is there anyone that I missed that had submitted testimony for House Bill 2060? Proponent, neutral, or opponent? All right, it does not look like that is the case. And committee, we did good work today. I will go ahead and close the hearing on House Bill. Well, oh my goodness, I don't know. I'm already making mistakes again. Yes, open for questions. And you please let me know who you would like to direct your questions. Representative Landwehr.
Scott, I haven't picked on you in a long time, so let's start with you. Well, I think you can ask Dion. I don't bite, so. What I struggle with is individuals or organizations asking us to fund a flawed formula that's not equal across all school districts. So even though you're neutral, you're opposed to this idea here because you want us to fund a flawed formula. Am I correct?
Well, you know, whether it's flawed or not, I think that's for y'all to decide. I believe the formula or the disbursement of special ed funds, from what Craig Neuenswander said yesterday, has been going on like this for 50 years, or from 74, I believe. So I think there's been a recognized problem. A lot of our districts are having to move general fund dollars into special ed, and that needs to be addressed. And I think the estimate is it was $100 million short this year. The governor's proposal gets it back up to 92%, but I agree. I think we could study it and fund it at the same time.
But at the same time, we heard yesterday, and Nick can correct me if I'm wrong because I don't want to put words in his mouth, was that the Supremes looked at this issue but didn't address it specifically. So they didn't see it as being a problem. Okay, just a moment, lady. I asked the reviser to see if I'm right or I'm wrong.
So just real quick, in Montoy, special education was more of a forefront issue. In Gannon, the plaintiffs did argue special education funding. The Supremes again said, especially in Gannon 4, they said that structurally not meeting that 92% doesn't render the structure of the formula inadequate, but it does and could factor into the overall adequacy determination. And then thereafter, the Supreme Court recognized the additions that you made and kind of left it at that.
Okay. At the same time, we have a very labor-intensive and expensive process if a school does not follow the IEP for the parents. So we want to give more money for special education when we know that there's a large majority, whether people want to believe that or not, of these IEPs that are not being followed.
I don't know about that. I think our special education graduation rates of special education students are among the top in the nation. And so I think there's a lot of good things going on in Kansas public schools when it comes to special education.
All right, thank you, Scott.
Representative Poskin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's for you, Scott. Thanks. Just back to the composition of the task force, do you have concerns that school boards from some of the districts that are funded at 60%, at 70%, 80%, that are taking on the large deficit amounts are going to be underrepresented on this task force.
I think that is a concern. I was looking at the old special education task force. I believe it was 12 members. There were 4 appointed by legislative leaders. There were 3 appointed from KASB, USA, Kansas, and they had to appoint people from the 3 different levels of school, small, medium, large school districts. To me, that kind of makes sense.
It does.
And the Commissioner of Education was also either a member or appointed someone. So I think if you kind of expand it into that kind of, I'm not saying that's exactly the right, but if you would get people with just more experience and more knowledge of what is a very complicated topic.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I would note that with that question, that it includes 1 member appointed by the State Board of Education, so they could appoint someone from a smaller school. 2 members are appointed from the State Department of Education that include professionals. So you could get to the same objective if you wanted to through what we've provided without any specifics. Representative Owsley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would just like to point out that Kansas Action for Children did submit neutral testimony, and I think it might have just landed in our mailbox, or it might have gotten lost in our committee assistant situation. But then also, I don't know who the question's for. You had made the comment that this was in statute before, and I'm curious if there's a expiration date. Is there a sunset on this, or is this just a task force that's ongoing?
So this doesn't have an expiration date, but naturally it would. When the other statute was first put into language, I believe it was 2008, and then it wasn't repealed into 2012. So the reason it doesn't have a sunset is because it's not intended to go on indefinitely, but it is up to the legislature in the next year or the next year decide, you know what, we've resolved this, we're satisfied, we repeal. Is that correct, Nick?
Yeah, you are correct. The prior task force went into place in 2008. It did have a sunset date placed to cease to exist on June 11, 2011. So that was the lifespan of that task.
Okay, so I definitely stand corrected. If a sunset date was the desire of the committee, I would not have a problem with that.
And is there, Madam Chair, is there a time frame that you had in mind, or the maker of the motion for House Bill 2060?
Sure. Number one, the time frame is whatever time it takes to get it right. And I know that we've been struggling through this issue, studying this issue, looking at every different piece of this formula, and it's complicated. It looks like it's easy, but it's not. And I think we all got a taste of that yesterday, and we'll hear more about it next week on Tuesday. So ideally, we would have a decision, something presented back to the legislature next year. The thinking is we've got a biennial, give us 2 years to get this out, get our statute right, get our math right. So that's ideally what would, that's just one person's thinking, not everyone else's.
And then I guess if I may, just to the conferee's point that we could fund special education while studying it, would it be the intention of the committee or the desire of the committee to do both that, to fund our obligation for special education excess cost and study it through the task force, or would it be a one or the other?
So for this bill, it doesn't actually connect to the funding. That will happen in our funding bill. Every member in this committee will have the ability and the opportunity to weigh in on that discussion on our K-12 education budget. That's where the special education funding will reside. And so that debate will reside at that time. This is its own unique bill. It's certainly relevant. You're welcome to bring it up. It's not that I'm discouraging you bringing it up, but in terms of the actual, they are not mutually exclusive is what I'm saying.
I appreciate that clarification. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Other questions? Representative Wynn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I may have overlooked it. Is there a fiscal note to this?
Actually, there is a fiscal note, and I meant to bring it up, and it's sitting right here. Nick provided it for us, and it is whenever you have a task force, there is a cost that is incurred. And do you want to talk about that, Nick?
I don't think I brought up the fiscal note, and I would just be looking at it. It is available online on House Bill 2060's webpage, so if you want to look at that, I assume this, JG, do we know who they asked? Department of Ed for this?
Yes, Department of Ed. And I'm looking at right here, it's 25,831 is the estimate. It would be for, yeah, LAS and committee assistant salaries, and I think the per diems probably include that. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, per every year that you actually, it's active. So you could have it in statute, or is it per meeting? It's per meeting? No, I don't know. So I would just say, everybody make sure, we're not working it, so let's make sure we take a look at the fiscal note. Representative Landwehr. Did you say something?
JG, is that something we could look into to drill down on this a little bit more to find out if this is a per meeting? I mean, I'm sure it's like a guesstimate because it's on the call of the chair.
It's 4.
So in the
4 meetings?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, go.
In the second to last paragraph of that fiscal note, it says, the estimate would assume 4 meetings of the task force each year. Of this amount, 14,628 is for legislator pay, including salary, subsistence, mileage. 2,499 is for committee assistant salaries and fringe benefit costs, and 3,204 is for non-legislator expenses. So that's for fiscal year 2024.
Okay, so for 4 meetings.
So,
Right,
JG,
so it could be less because we're not paying non-legislative members.
Sure, it could be. Representative Owsley, did you have a question? No? All right, good. Hopefully we'll also get this on our S drive. If not, it is on our attached with the bill. So did I miss anyone? Any other questions? Great work today. We are officially adjourned and